Yes, please. All right. Well, good evenings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the October 5th Transportation and Public Works meeting, 6 p.m., and we will call this meeting to order. At this point, we will do a roll call for those that are here, and we will start with Council President Knudsen.
Councillor Knudsen here.
Okay. Followed by myself, Councillor Prachu here. And so we will also say that Councillor McReynolds has an unexcused absence this evening. And we will move on to the beginning of the agenda. So that was actually number one. The second will be item number 2, the approval of the minutes from August 31st, 2020. And I had a chance to read those, and I know that Councillor Knudsen wrote those. So I think that I can go ahead and make a motion to approve those minutes, so I will do that. I motion to approve the minutes from the August 31st, 2020 meeting.
I second that motion.
Okay, and with the second, we'll go ahead and I believe vote, so I will go ahead and call the vote. Councillor Knudsen.
Councillor Knudsen votes yes.
And Councillor Prachu votes yes, so that passes and the minutes are approved. So we will move on to item number 3, which is the discussion of the street finance. And I believe I will turn that over to Manager Amberg. Is that correct?
Sure, I can.
Okay.
I can kick off that discussion, although
okay.
I'm going to hand it off pretty fast.
Okay, that's good.
As you know, we've been talking about. I think as a committee have 2 levels that you need to view this from. The first level is going to be sort of a general overall, how do we find the revenues over the next 10 to 15 years to complete the projects that were identified in our street, our transportation system plan. So you need to kind of keep that, in mind. But the more pressing, I think the more important thing that we need to talk about, the more timely thing is actually, the Second Street project, which we're coming to a close on the 8th Street project. Maybe Cliff could give us a quick update on where we're at with that. And where we're finishing with regard to the budget. I didn't ask him to come prepared to talk about that, but if he has that information, it might be good for this group to review that. But also to start thinking about what Second Street is going to look like as we move forward. The problem that we have with Second Street is there really is no revenue to do it. And so we'll be starting from $0 and trying to put together a funding package that allows us to complete Second Street within a reasonable time frame, within maybe a 3 to 5 year horizon, I think is what we had in mind. So there are 3 tools that we'll talk about tonight. One will be gas tax, and thank you to Bill. And did the AMPM manager also, was he able to attend?
Never responded.
Never did. Okay. Well, thank you, Bill, for coming tonight because your input is very valuable to us. So that's the gas tax, which we've kind of already discussed. The possibility of a LID, which we can discuss, and that's why I asked Steve to join us. He has more experience with LIDs throughout the state, I think. And so he can give you a better background on that. And of course, the transportation system utility fee or a street fee, that is something else he can also probably give you more of a background, a generalized background, so you can learn more about that. So how would you like to take this? Would you like to, Cliff, are you ready to, would you mind giving us an update on the 8th Street project?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
As we stand today, the sewer and storm utilities are installed. The water line is installed also. It has a pressure test done on it this week, and it's under chlorination right now for disinfection. Curb and gutter is about 90% installed, and rock subgrade has started to go in. So we're starting to look more like a road instead of a big construction project. So we're about 75% complete. As far as where we're at in the project with finances, as it sits right now, we're going to come in about 120,000 over bid on the project as of right now.
Thank you, Cliff. And that's not unusual. It's not unusual once you get down under the surface. You find out things about the subgrade and infrastructure that often require change orders. This one had quite a few because of the poor quality of the subgrade. Is that correct, Cliff?
That's
Which you really couldn't tell prior to going in. Hey, Jim, what was the source of funding for A Street?
A Street funding was reserves. We also had some grant revenues. Like I mentioned in the memo, every year we accumulate $50,000 in federal funds that we can exchange with the state for state funding. We've depleted the through, I believe, 2020. So yeah, that's reserving those funds.
I'm sorry, I'm not working with a lot of resources in front of me. So can you tell us what the target number is for Second Street? What is the nut we have to crack there?
Well, for Second, we broke it into two phases. We've got Oregon F Street, and that's really the infrastructure cost right now because of the manufacturing bakery. That's at 1.2 million in 2018 dollars. After we adjust for inflation, we're looking at 1.4 million in 2019 fiscal year 2020 dollars in plan to be spent. The second phase of the project is about 1.2 million in 2018 dollars. It's hard to estimate what that's going to be when we get to the project. But as you can see in the first phase, if we estimate the project back 5 years, we've increased the costs by 85% with inflation.
And then there's possibly unknown. Oh, Counselor, you go ahead.
Sorry, could you just repeat those figures again for me, please?
Sure. So Oregon F Street is 1.2 million in 2018 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, if we do the project for 22, 23 as we're expecting, it'll be more like 1.4 million dollars. That's just the inflation over 4 or 5 years on the project.
Got it. Thank you.
All together is going to be 2.4 million to do it all the way from F Street, Oregon to the terminus is estimated at 2.4 million.
And then what did you say about phase two?
Phase 2 we don't have on the radar just yet.
But there will be one.
Yeah, we need to put that road all the way up to the end. It's just getting more expensive along the freeway.
So the phase one is all that's in our sites right now, though.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other?
Cliff, could you let them know what's involved in phase one of Second Street?
Yeah. Phase one is from Oregon Avenue to F Street intersection. Obviously, Second Street. It's widening and turning the road into more of a commercial style road because it has a bus route that goes on it several times a day. So it'd be widening, larger sidewalks, curb gutter, storm, and sewer. The water line was reconstructed back in 07 or 08, so there wouldn't be a whole lot with the water system in that road. So it's actually a little bit of a cheaper project, taking out the water portion of it.
I remember Maddie showing us some stuff here not too long ago that looked really cool for that intersection there. Is that pretty much still the plan? What you guys are thinking of doing? It's I remember there was some parking redesign and such.
It would
And then-
follow
There's
the downtown plan.
I was going to say there's actually a couple of commercial applications that we need to keep in mind as we work down Second Street. And one is the new fire department building. I don't know, haven't heard much from the fire district since John Wooten has been back, or before he left actually. So I don't know where they're at with that project. But yeah, part of it would be redesigning the street around the bakery. Cliff, do you have some things to say about that?
It would be kind of a design build with bakery parking at the forefront of how we would design that intersection. It would follow downtown plan with bolt outs and parallel parking, but the bakery has such a large clientele that we would be looking at doing some sort of development, maybe a block each way on B Street to accommodate some extra parking. We haven't quite came up with exactly how that would look, but that's kind of where we would head to maybe get some extra parking for that business.
Yeah, and also the schoolhouse is right there too. So, and they have no dedicated parking at all. So if they ever have an event there, they'll be needing to use on street or some kind of public parking off site. So there's a lot of planning work to do on Second Street as we move forward. But I think you're correct. Some of that has been started. Councilor Procu.
Okay. Are there any questions at this point before we move forward? Okay. I think somebody was about to speak, so okay.
I was going to ask the same thing you just asked.
So I guess the natural point of the discussion is that we've heard already about the different options that are available to us. So maybe as we think about the Second Street project, particularly for the moment, how do we want to approach that? And it sounds to me like possibly a combination of some of the things we've talked about.
That's what we think we're going to need. I mean, 1.4 million is a lot of money to raise in 3 years. That's
Okay.
a lot to expect our community to cough up on its own. So maybe we should talk about the gas tax. Why don't you go ahead and Jim's our expert on the gas tax. Jim, why don't you go ahead and talk about that for a bit?
Sure, Shel, thank you. The local gas tax is an option for financing. Needed on gallons sold is federally legal through the state of Oregon, since they can receive all the so it's fairly easy to compute the number of gallons times the potential tax revenue. It looks like the volume that's sold in Crestville annually could bring a stream of about $200,000 a year on a 3% tax. That is something we have to go before voters and something we can't just implement that has to be voted on.
I've heard two different things about that, and I don't know why that is. Somebody says no, council can do that without a vote, and I'm saying no because that's a tax. You can't do that. Has there been in any city that ever tried it or did it without a public vote that we know of?
There was a time period where cities could enact it without a vote, and that time period is up. You have to have a vote now.
Okay, and not that I would suggest that we would do otherwise, because I think it's important that we have a vote. So I was just trying to understand why it is, because I kept hearing, oh yeah, so did it without a vote, and I'm like, I don't think so, you know. So okay, so let's talk.
It did happen in the past, and those cities were very fortunate. I don't think they've had much luck in increasing the gas tax though since then.
So there's obviously impacts to doing this. So we understand just from what we've seen that public perception and receiving of this is a touchy subject that requires some input. And we have Mr. Spencer with us today. I would like to invite him to maybe share with us maybe some of his thoughts and towards the subject.
Am I unmuted?
You are?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's a valid way to raise funds for what you're raising funds for public roads, for cars to drive on. I don't disagree with it. I do think that I'm so glad that you're going to have a public vote on it, because I don't think our city needs to have an unhappy citizenship that thinks that a few elected officials are going to cram something down their throats. That doesn't work well in maybe even big cities, but not in small towns. So I love the fact that you're going to take it to a vote. I think it's the right thing to do. I think that I would urge the council to not think that they have to rely on the state of Oregon for information that's right here in the city of Cresswell. We have those numbers, and they're probably even more accurate than what the states are, because there's various things that play into that. So if the council decides to do that, I would very much like to be a part of helping the council figure out the best, cheapest way to get accurate numbers. So I'm hereby volunteering to do that if it ends up being the right thing to do. I think that's probably the main thing, except that obviously when you put a tax on something like that, the people have to believe in what you're doing. They have to believe that you're spending the money wisely and well. And I guess that's nothing new, though, for city government. I would say that, to add to what I said before, when I listened in to a work session and it was presented a possible bill by the attorney that had taken ideas from other cities, that you can do better than that bill by quite a bit, in my opinion. If you'll let me be a part of that, I'll be able to point out some things that I think would make it a better bill. Not necessarily for me, maybe for me, but certainly for the city. Just in the way the bookwork's done, various things like that. So I would love it if you would keep that in mind. Probably the last thing, and this one becomes personal, is that if this goes on forward, I'd like to either see it phased in or delayed just long enough so we can, in our situation, can have time to get our feet on the ground after building a new gas station. That is a personal request. It is not, I don't know what to say. It feels selfish to me, but I also will tell you that it feels somewhat necessary.
I think
how long would that, I'm just curious what time frame you're looking at, Bill.
Well, we plan to open the station this year, Michelle. And so it takes a while to see if we're going to grow our volume And in order to grow our volume in a new station, I suspect we have to be very, very competitive with Cottage Grove and the points south of us.
I see that Councillor Knudsen has her hand up, so I want to give her the option or the opportunity to speak.
Sorry, I'm fervently taking notes at the same time, and then I came up with a question, and then I have to look back and see what I had a question about. Oh, so Bill, you said you're glad that we want to take it to a public vote, and you think that the public needs to feel involved and support this. So from what we're talking about South 2nd Street, do you think that that's a big enough project, that's an important enough project that the public would go, yeah, we definitely need that? Or is it not something that you would think is warranted?
I believe that it should not be limited to talking about 2nd Street. I think that's a good piece of it. But of course, I have to admit that I come from a perspective of a lot of years of watching a lot of roads be improved, whether it's 5th Street, Harvey Road. You know, there's been a bunch of them that have been improved, including Oregon Avenue. But it's not just 2nd Street that needs to be improved. You've got a list of several of them. I think that that's almost campaign material that we're talking about, Amy. You know, getting people to drive those roads, or better yet, tell them to walk that road.
Yeah.
And some of those things. So they understand there is an ongoing need to maintain, you know, Cresswell, in my opinion, has had a good history of providing improved roads. I've been in a lot of small towns that have not done as well. I'm proud of what's been going on in the past, but it doesn't take care of the future. I know we need to be able to have a source of income to do that.
Okay, thank you.
If I can jump in.
Absolutely.
Bill made a good point there that, you know, we're talking about these things with an eye on the 2nd Street improvement, but most likely if we were to have a gas tax, it wouldn't be solely for 2nd Street. 2nd Street would be like an example of how we would use the money. You know, if we had a 3% sales tax, for example, that would be going forward. And so that money would always be available for street improvements. That's the lovely thing about a gas tax, is that it's probably the most flexible of all of the revenue sources that we have. So if we say we got some kind of crazy infrastructure bill passed in the federal government, we could then take the gas tax and use it for other ways of improving our streets. Yeah, the gas tax is very flexible. It's a great instrument if you can put it out before the public and get them to approve one. Now, the hard part, I think, is going to be telling the people of Cresswell we have $1.4 million that we want to raise in the next 5 years, and it's going to come all from you. So, you know, the gas tax is a nice kind of a little bit of a change there, because we do get people on and off I-5 that would be contributing then to our roadways. But the other two sources come directly out of the pockets of the people in Cresswell. So, you know, we've got to think about the message that we're going to put out to the people of Cresswell about how important it is for all of our streets, and just use 2nd Street as the example of the next street we need to improve. But none of these tools are going to go away. They're going to be, once we put them in place, they're going to be put in place so that we can do D Street, so that we can do, you know, an F Street, so that we can do the off-ramp off, you know, the new right-of-way maybe into Bald Knob, these sorts of things. So while we're talking about 2nd Street right now in particular numbers, just keep in mind that these funding mechanisms that we're talking about are going to go on into the future to fund additional types of projects. And we might want to think about how we're going to talk about that to kind of sell these things, because I think Bill's right. We can't, as a city, say, okay, the city council has the authority to put in a street utility fee. But I don't think he wants to do that without first doing a full education campaign. And really, let's get information out to the public. Let's make sure everybody understands our transportation system plan and its needs and how it serves them and what the costs are, so that we can, get out there that we need a street utility fee, that this is how the gas tax supplements the street utility fee. We can't just have a gas tax that'll provide all of the money. That's impossible. And we can't have a street utility fee that provides all the money. And then we can actually talk about how an LID, since the street will benefit the homeowners and property owners along 2nd Street, how they can also contribute in and receive value back. So do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Actually, I have some comments based on that real quick. First of all, I want to, there's two things I was hearing with regards to the gas tax, and one of them was the flexibility at which we have and what projects we use those on. But I also heard Mr. Spencer say that we also have to be careful about public perception. And so then when we start talking about all three of these things, then I think that the same rules apply. And what we're going to have is that we're going to need to demonstrate that we're being responsible with the funds no matter what we're doing. So whether it's through the LID or through the public safety or the utility bill, or through the gas tax, I think that we'll need to be sure to do that. And the education campaign, as I mentioned, seems to me like a really good way to make sure that we're doing that by being transparent and accountable with that information. So I guess my next question would be, because 2nd Street is probably our next big project, of these three things, which do we think might be the quickest to get going? And I also want to maybe talk a little bit more with Bill as far as what he sees that staged implementation on the gas tax being, so that we kind of have an idea maybe, and we can start thinking about how much money we'd be receiving. So if, year one is a 1%, year two, however that might look.
Well, we wouldn't, just to let you know, Bill, we wouldn't put it on the ballot until 2021 at the soonest. So that would be probably November of 2021. It might be November 2022.
Okay, and I see Mr. Spencer has his hand up, so I'm going to let him speak.
I just want to make sure, Jim, you're recording this. Would you make sure that Michelle meant to say 3% and not 3 cents a gallon, because 3% scares me to death?
Yeah, that's much more. 3 cents a gallon, I believe what she meant.
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, Bill.
That's all right. I just
That scared me.
I apologize. I misspoke. It is 3 cents per gallon. Yes. And as to, which one we could get started soonest, I don't know that it's a question of starting it soonest as far as being comfortable using all three and being able to educate the public as to why we are going to use all three, and to listen to what the public has to say about their readiness to pay each one of them.
If I could, there's things I said 8 years or 10 years ago to city council, and that was that the biggest loss that this city's ever had and other small cities is when the federal government decided to quit letting us cut trees on federal land. That's what paid for all of our stuff in the cities. And I know that we can't make everything happen, but I don't understand why small cities like Cresswell and Junction City and Elmira and Florence don't at least have a request out there to the city or to the state and to the county and stuff, why there's no desire on our end to push for some more timber cutting. It may not be possible, but if we take a long-term position that it's not a terrible thing to cut trees so they don't burn up, it may be more popular now than it's been in the last 20 years. I don't know. But if you take all the things you can do, the other one that I'd asked for was that the county pass a road tax of maybe 5 cents and then distribute it to the cities when they collect it in the cities, and keep it for the county when it's a county gas station, like there is, for instance, between Junction City and Eugene. And the reason I've liked that is because it's very fair to the retailer. We all have the very same, it's a level playing field. And so I had suggested that before. There are gas stations between us and Eugene that are not paying a gas tax. Right now, they are not competitive stations because the philosophy of those owners is to have a high margin and low volume. In the past, that's not always been true. So I'll just toss those ideas to you. I'm not going to campaign on those, out loud to anybody, but if I was just brainstorming, I'd love to see some of that timberland money come back to help us.
I could talk for hours on that one, Bill. I was down in Josephine County and Jackson County when the timber receipts ran out, and the big push that they did down there, and the almost complete dependence that the roads had on those two sources of funding. And it has been around 10 years now, and we are seeing a big impact on the loss of that funding. Unfortunately, most of the funding that comes from the federal government now goes to the state, and that means that we have to go through ODOT, and we just have no luck with ODOT.
Tell me about it.
Phenomenal. Yeah, it's impossible to work with ODOT. I wish we had another source of funding, but I'd be happy to talk to you about that, Bill, and where that is at, and what folks are, but it's just realistically not something we can put on the table at this time.
I liked that county option that you mentioned, Bill. I don't know what that would look like, although I know that it would take longer to even get something like that rolling. So it might be even something else that we can pursue collectively on the side, maybe along with our own local one. Or were you thinking that as a replacement for a local tax?
I haven't thought about that, but just as you say it, let's say we go with a 3-cent tax in Cresswell here in a reasonable length of time. But Eugene's probably got 7 cents or something like that, 6, I don't know. And other people are closer to 3. But if it was countywide at 5, and you could end up with 2 more cents, replace the local one with a 5-cent county one, that would be a real plus for you, dollars and cents wise.
Mm-hmm. And you believe that to be a more equitable distribution of the way that the funds are
competition wise, it seems fair. It seems fair to me.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Bill while we're discussing the gas tax? Do we know maybe what we want to do with that, or does this just kind of give us information today? I think that's kind of where I'm at, is I'm more of in an information seeking mode rather than making any kind of big decisions about where to go with any of this. But
it sounds to me like if we go down this direction, we certainly need to take him up on his offer to help us. Mm-hmm. I thank you, Bill. That's a very generous offer, and I think Jim and you need to get together and really go over things together and make sure that we do this the best possible way we can.
One thing that we can maybe start working on would be what we think the educational campaign might look like.
Yeah, but let's talk about the other 2 sources before we go.
Absolutely. Listen.
I don't think you want to take these separately. I think or else people are going to get like, well, first you told us that this would work, and now you're taking money for that, and now you want money for this, and it's all for the same stuff? What the heck? So I think they have to understand it's going to be this 3-prong approach, and that this 3-prong approach is really fair. The gas tax is fair because it's a way of creating ongoing revenue that's very flexible and very useful. The transportation utility fee is fair because it depends on how much you use the streets as to how much you pay. And so so everyone pays a fair share under the street utility fee. And then the LID is fair because people whose properties are going to be improved by this street going through will realize, some property value increases will contribute a portion of the project to realize those improvements. So, I think it's important to bundle them, and show why each one makes sense and each one is fair. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'd like Steve to talk about the street utility fee a little bit, if that's okay.
If we were taking it in order, the LIDs would be next and then the transportation fee, but I don't mind which way we go with it.
Well, I'm going to take this and bundle it all up in a little different way so that you can see a different perspective from me and from what I see in other cities. And there really are, rather than just three, there's about 5 different ways that we see cities fund streets. And you're talking about 3 of the 5. The fourth of the fifth, and one that you need to get out to your public as well, is SDC fees. You are collecting SDC fees, and they will go towards improving streets to provide additional capacity. And your public needs to understand that developers are paying a share for SDC. They're paying a share for streets through the SDC methodology. The fifth way, which you don't see very often at all, in fact, you never see it in small cities, is you sometimes see bond measures where a community will bundle up a bunch of projects, do a bond measure, and use their sewer and water revenues to guarantee it and have a bond measure. That's very, very rare. We just don't see that in small cities. But I wanted to throw that out so that you knew there is another option. Salem does that a lot. Salem will go out with a big bond measure about every 5 or 6 years, and they just keep rotating them. And they're pretty savvy about that because they pick streets in different quadrants of the city to where the public wants that street fixed, and so they get the votes to get them approved. Just something else to put out there in case you want to explore that option. I also want to talk. I now want to talk about the street fee a little bit, and
Sorry, I don't.
Yeah, we have a couple folks that want to speak here.
You have a lot of knowledge. This is your job. We don't. I'm like taking everything that you have to say in, so I'm going to have questions about something before you move on to the next thing, just to let you know. So, okay. Absolutely. SDCs. I was under the impression we could not use SDCs for road improvements. We can only do it for like sewer and water and all that stuff to improve those structures. So I'm confused as to the SDC thing.
You recently upped your transportation STCs. They're about $3,750 per equivalent dwelling unit. And those transportation STC fees can be used to increase capacity. So let's just say a normal residential street is, I'm just going to use 34 feet. It's a pretty standard street, 34 feet. But you want to make it wider. You want to do something different to create additional capacity. You're absolutely allowed through your SDC methodology to use that money to create additional capacity.
Got it.
And you can decide to do that. I will tell you one street that comes to mind, and we're talking about that, is the street by the Super 8 Motel to the industrial area. That clearly is an SDC eligible street because if that street ever gets built, it's going to provide capacity for the city, and 100% of that street would be SDC eligible. Does that make sense?
Yep, that does. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions?
We have 2 other hands up here, so I wanted to take them in order. I don't know if Bill meant to have his hand up or not, but Mr. Piper, you're next.
Thank you, Councilor. The memo I sent out, the SDCs were addressed. let's at least start performing better than we have in the past. I still don't see those coming in. I had a projection out there for 25 superintendent rankings. And I figure this was kind of our case in 2014, 2015, 2016, when they were building houses. The annual revenue from that is about 100,000 a year with our SDC fees. Not a huge source, but it is a source, Steve. I definitely will take it, and it will increase the capacity on some of those road projects. I do like the idea of using it for new road with the right of way to the Super 8. Absolutely. The other option that Steve had mentioned, the bond, this is something that's out there. The problem with debt maintenance is you got to have a revenue source to pay the debt payments. And currently, we can put it at 100,000 a year in our road fund, and we pay the crew to do the maintenance and repairs that they do every year. That's what we can put in reserves. I don't think that money would go very far to pay debt service. So our borrowing capacity is pretty small in the city.
One of the things about debt service too in a bond is you have to float a large enough bond that someone will buy it. We went through this with Toledo, and we floated I want to say a $2 million bond, or maybe it was a $3 million bond, and we had a hard time finding someone who would buy the bond. So it's one thing for a city of, Salem to float $100 million bond or a $75 million bond. It's really hard to float a small bond in a small city.
Okay, and I see now, Mr. Spencer, did you have your hand up?
No.
He did not. Okay, so I think Steve, it's back to you.
Okay, back to me. Well, and so, like I say, we don't see small cities doing bond measures at all, and it's because of that. There's just not a market for that. And I want you to keep that in mind when I get to LIDs coming up here, and we talk about LIDs just in a little bit, because and how the LIDs are funded. So there, in my research, there's at least 20 cities who have a street utility fee, and that utility fee varies across the board, but let's just say, and it's hard to tell you exactly, but let's just say generally it's $15 per equivalent dwelling unit per month. It's a pretty substantial fee, honestly. Your public safety fee is now $14 a month. You can see if we add another $15, that's a pretty substantial fee. I think, Jim, correct me if I'm not wrong, but didn't that, if we did $15 a month, that's equivalent to about 300,000 a year, is it not?
Right. Yeah, we have about 2,000 equivalent dwelling units, so that makes sense.
So now we've got a gas tax that does $200,000 a year. We've got a street fee that does, say, $300,000 a year. We got an SDC fee that's maybe going to do $100,000 a year. So we're up to $600,000 a year, best case scenario. The other thing I wanted to caution you about: every city that I did research on, their street fee talks about, it's primarily about maintaining streets. The one thing that I don't know if you've been educated about or not, but when streets start to go bad, if you don't maintain them, you pay a heavy, heavy premium if you wait too long. And we need to be cognizant of that. I'm not saying putting all the money towards Second Street is a bad thing. I'm just saying that I'm seeing more and more cities using the street utility fee, or the transportation utility fee. They're using that for more maintenance because they don't have dollars for maintenance. Okay, and I just want to make sure you understand that. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is, and not just exactly street fees, but we're seeing more and more cities do a stormwater fee and a street light fee. And I just want to put all this on the table. I'm not advocating, I'm not one way or the other, but the reason they do that is the stormwater fee what you do for maintenance of your stormwater takes directly from your street fee. That's where that money comes from. Your street light fees, what you're paying Pac Power for your street lights every month, comes straight out of your street fund. And so a lot of cities have determined that's not necessarily appropriate, that we should be, that the storm drain should be paying for its own maintenance. And I'm going to tell you for a fact, by the time the state and the feds get done with the city of Crestwell, your stormwater costs are going to go up exponentially. We're seeing that across the board. And I'm just trying to prepare you and give you a global picture. But are there any questions with that bit of revelation to date here?
That last bit was a little scary, but yeah. Jim, you have your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I still have it up.
Okay.
No, those are great to mention. The stormwater fee and the streetlight fee. I see those every year in the budget, and they're a big chunk of change. And to reiterate what Steve was saying about the transportation utility fee, yeah, you would want to put that in your maintenance budget. It would essentially allow us to use, right now we're using our ODOT funds for maintenance, basically to fund the streets that we go out and maintain the streets. That money then would be shifted towards capital projects. And that transportation utility fee would be used to maintain the streets. That's a good point, Steve.
Yeah, and I actually think that's a more appropriate way to use the transportation utility fee, honestly. So, and again, there's about 20 cities in the state of Oregon, what I could find. They're all across the board. I could name them all if you wanted. I got a list in front of me right here. League of Oregon Cities did a pretty detailed study back in 2008. I don't think it's been updated. So there's a lot of information on a transportation utility fee that's out there for the city to use and look at if they want. So now I'd like to just talk a bit about LIDs and just my experience more than anything else. What I'm finding, it depends on what you do. We have some small cities, Jefferson in particular, that literally when they do a street improvement, they form an LID and they make the adjacent property owner pay for the sidewalk and they pay for the curb. And the city pays for the street proper, the city pays for the storm drain, they pay for other utilities. And the sidewalk and the curb itself, if we add those together for both sides, is maybe 10% of the construction cost. And the reason Jefferson does that is they don't want to hit these people with the full bore, but they want them to pay something for their improvement. And it is a very successful program because they're not hitting these people up with huge numbers. They're making them pay a proportional share of the street. There's very little political backlash that we ever see. You have a public hearing for these processes, and we've just never seen political backlash. I will tell you, though, that we've seen some cities try to do full LIDs for streets, and it's very, very rare that I see a council willing to form an LID for a full street that's, say, going to cost $800 per lineal foot and assess that to the property owners, unless they have at least 60% of the owners who want the street. I've never seen a council, if there's 30% of the people who want to pay for a street, to bite the bullet and assess that full street to the adjacent property owners. And I don't think that's what you're talking about. I'm just telling you the reality of it will be very, very hard for you to assess a full street improvement to adjacent property owners. I think it's easy to assign a proportional share. Okay. The last thing is, even if you decide to do that as an LID, the city has to somehow come up with the money. Let's just take this $1.4 million and say that it's 10 or 20% you decide to do. That's $280,000. you still have to have that money, because those people are not going to pay that for 10 years. They don't have to. Some people pay it right away. Some people wait and they pay it on their tax bill every 10 years. So I want to caution you about the LID, because that doesn't necessarily solve your funding, because you still have to go out and finance with those people, because you're just billing them annually on their property tax bill. Does that make sense?
It does. And I see that Cliff has his hand up. I'm going to give him a chance.
I do. Steve, just for context, could you tell us approximately lineal foot cost for curb gutter sidewalk?
I would say what we charge in Jefferson is we charge $50 to $60 per lineal foot per side.
Okay.
And I think that's light because we could throw in some engineering, we could throw in some other cost. So I would think that you would charge somewhere in the $70, maybe $80 per lineal foot. The curb and gutter itself is, say, $25 a foot. The sidewalk is going to be $30 a foot. Then you've got excavation, you've got rock, you've got some other things. So you could charge maybe as much as $80 per lineal foot. Now, these streets, are costing $800 a lineal foot. So if you charged $80 per lineal foot per side, that would basically be 20% of the cost would be assessed to the adjacent property owners. And again, if we're talking about, let's say I've got 100 feet of frontage, I got an $8,000 assessment and I got a brand new street in front of me. And in Jefferson, people are ecstatic about that. Okay.
Very good. I just wanted to kind of get that context out there.
Yeah, and you could decide you want to charge a little more if you wanted. I mean, I don't know how, and I've been the city engineer in Jefferson for over 35 years. Okay, so probably close to 40. And I don't know how we came up with this methodology, but we just decided that the benefiting property owners had to pay, and we just limited it to curb and gutter and sidewalk, and it's been a very successful program every time they go to improve a street. So that's a lot in a very short period of time. I do think you're hitting on the right issues: the gas tax, the LID, the street fee, and I think your street fee is going to be about $50 per unit. But you could, if you wanted, you could divide that street fee up and say, well, part of that's going to go to storm drain and take that out of the street cost. Part of it's going to go to street light. Now, this is all depends upon what your constituency, what they understand. And so you can break that $15 out, and you can pull at least $5 out for street lights and storm drain, at least, and then put $10 that's just towards, let's say, street maintenance. The other thing that you must do is you have a TSP. This is what your public needs to understand. You have a TSP. I got it here somewhere. I don't know where I put it. Oh, right now you need $30 to $40 million, and we're talking about maybe generating $600,000 a year. And so, in 10 years, you have 6 million. So in 10 years, you're touching 20% of your need. Your public needs to understand that there's a $30 to $40 million need out here for our transportation system. And by the way, the TSP doesn't even address maintenance. So
I have my.
I'm so sorry that I'm so brutally honest with you and very bad, but those are the realities everybody's facing.
I am so depressed. Actually, I've been listening to this, and it does bring me back to the bonding question. If we're getting up into if we wanted to say if we wanted to cherry pick our favorite big projects out of the TSP, we could float a bond to the public rather than doing an internal bond, which is what I was thinking before. There's two ways to do a bond. One is without a vote and one is with a vote. If you go without a vote, you have to pledge your own internal money to pay back the bond if it defaults. But if you go to the, well, I guess on the public vote, you still have to as well. But the public vote is paid by taxes, not fees. So if you were to go and say, okay, public, we're going to fix that railroad crossing and 2nd Street and C Street and D Street, and that's going to be $25 million. And that's going to be, I don't know, Jim, what would that be on a 20-year bond? Do you know? Can you figure that off off the top of your head?
Right now, quick.
I mean, we might want to figure that out. That might be something we need. That might be a number that would be good to know.
I guess that's you're going with the kind of the way I was with Michelle, maybe sort of, but I was kind of wondering if we start actually collecting some of the fees in the different ways that we've discussed, then that actually gives us some of the money that they would be looking at to say, well, you got to pay that back. Well, yeah, we've been collecting money now for a while. Is that kind of how you're thinking it would work, or
no?
Completely
What
different.
I'm thinking,
Okay.
yeah, no, I'm going down what would pay back the bond would actually be a property tax.
Oh, okay.
So the property tax,
like a levy.
you need to know. Yeah, a levy. It would be like a levy. It's a rate per thousand. That's why it has to go to a vote, because it comes onto the properties. It's a tax. It's not something that the city's doing a bond of. That's going to be supported by the general fund or by fees, which is what we're talking about now. But it would actually be a property tax supported bond, like when the school district decides they're going to do a capital improvement project, they float a bond. But of course, that's backed by the state. That's not backed by anyway, that's a little bit different. But anyway, I think, the question is, the question I have in my mind is, do you think that people want to see the railroad crossing intersection with ODOT fixed badly enough that they would be willing to have a property tax imposed on them that would also fix some of these other streets? Do you think, I'm kind of curious, Bill, what you might think of that, and also what you, Amy, and Kevin might think of that, since you're the elected officials. Might have if you have any sense of how people might feel about a bond rather than all of these. And then actually we could still have a gas tax for maintenance. We can still have a street utility fee, or maybe instead of a street utility fee, maybe it's better to go with the lighting utility fee, street lights utility, and then use the gas tax for maintenance. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to do a bond for anything less than a huge project that would have an overwhelming support of the public. So what do you think? Do you understand my question?
I do. I'm going to give opportunities for others first.
I'll go if nobody's willing. I see that it could work. I see that if we had enough projects under our belt that we would say that it's going to go towards, that people could possibly. But I don't know. I don't know if they'd go for it. I don't know if it would be, you talk about bond measures and people don't typically go, yay, a bond measure. So it would take a lot of work to get people on board. But I do know people hate that intersection. I mean, that intersection is a nightmare. And I understand that it's been a nightmare and we can't fix it without ODOT, and we can't do anything. Our hands are kind of tied. And if that could untie that and get that fixed and get that traffic flowing better, and we could also get the other right-of-way by Super 8 and get that flow of traffic, I think that's a huge project that would alleviate a lot of the issues that we have in Crestwell coming in and out of our town. So I see it yes, and then I see it no.
I'm with Councillor Knudsen on that one. I would just say that to me, if we were able to look at it from what the benefits are when we do these projects, so if we were to do, say, the intersection that we're talking about, the jog, I think is what we're mentioning, right? So, and we fix that problem, then what does that do for our city? It signals that we're possibly ready for some more economic growth and development within that area of the city because we've fixed this one thing. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is that we are a small town, and it's a lot to ask for a lot of people in this time right now, for sure. So, and I'm kind of just a little leery of having multiple different points in. You know, you've got this kind of tax and that kind of fee and this kind of thing or whatever. So we got to be really careful not to just keep adding on, but have a really good balance of the right things. Is my comment.
So the last thing I would say, where I've seen successful bond measures, it's all about timing. You don't want to have a bond measure the same time the school district is applying for a bond measure. You know, what Salem does is they make sure their bond measures are rolling off before they come out with a new one, and their basic promotion is your taxes aren't changing. And their first bond measure was passed 30 years ago, and they just keep rolling them off. But their message is your taxes aren't going to change because this bond measure is being paid off, and we're going to go improve these roads. So it's, if there's a fire district bond, if there's a school district bond, if there's other bond measures, you'll never be successful. So it's a timing issue for you if you decide to go that way.
Yeah, we don't have any bonds like that are going to come off. And I know that the fire district has a bond that they're going to try to do for the station improvements. So I think, though, if we went the bond route, we wouldn't go the fees. I don't see those two working together. Maybe the LID in a bond and the gas tax for maintenance, the general maintenance. But I couldn't see doing the street utility fee and doing a bond. But what concerns me about the bond is we couldn't people would not even consider a property tax when we did the survey for policing. Are streets different because it's a capital thing? Do you think people would view it differently than policing? We could not pass the police levy, according to the survey that we did. There was it was dramatic in my memory. I could be wrong, but it seems that I recall that there was no support for a levy, but support for the utility fee.
That's correct, yeah.
So can I ask a question? Because I'm just an outsider looking in. What if you couldn't pass a public safety fee? Bond. How in the world did you pass a $14 a month public safety fee without getting hatcheted?
The fee doesn't have to go to the voters.
But I can tell you in Olivesville, the voters came out and voted the council out. They voted the council out and put a new council in.
Can I answer that quickly, if you don't mind?
I would love to know.
I think that the way that we were able to do the policing fee was because we had surveys, which included educational components. So there was an engagement process there that I think would help us tremendously if we were to apply it here.
Okay. It just seems strange to me if they wouldn't support, a bond measure for public safety. A $14 a month fee on a sewer and water bill is a big fee for a single family.
I can say it was discussed a lot on council. It was discussed with the budget committee. The surveys that came out at the beginning of the year, granted, it was a very small percentage of people. It's whoever you can get to take a survey. They all have been saying that they want the fourth deputy. And that's the problem with Cresswell is we don't have 24/7 coverage. So that was a big sell saying we're getting closer to 24/7 coverage in our town, which is what people have been asking for. And so saying we can get that, we can get closer to that with a fourth deputy. That was the sell. It was, I think people have a perception that they're scared. They don't have enough police coverage, and so they're willing to pay for it. Where streets, yeah, streets probably won't resonate as well, because who cares about streets? But people care a lot about public safety, and they care a lot about their homes and their children, and that's what I think resonated with people, and I think that's why it passed. I don't know what else to say beyond that.
Well, it is interesting. When it first passed, when I first came here in 2014, and the public safety fee was instituted, people were like, "We don't want to pay this on a monthly fee. We want this on our taxes. We want a levy. We want a levy. We want a levy." So we were like, "Oh, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have made it a fee. We should have made it a levy." So then, as the years went by and as we added deputies incrementally, it's just sort of, the fee just sort of grew. And now when we took the last survey, people are like, "No, we want to pay $15 a month. We don't want to pay more in property taxes. We pay enough property taxes." So it was like this sort of change in mentality, in that, yeah, I can afford an extra $15 a month for 4 deputies, which is what I always wanted. You know, that $15 is like a week's worth of coffee or something, however they justified it in their own mind. But boy, they did not want to pay more property tax.
No.
Well, Michelle, I think you're right. If you do the bond measure, you should just limit it to the gas tax, the LID, and then possibly investigate a storm drain fee and a street light fee, because it does feel to me that a street fee would be too much, but people do need to understand the storm drain fee, the storm drain that Public Works is going to have to deal with, in 5 years from now, is radically different than what it is today.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that.
So, Steve, I want to make sure that you've given us all of the options that you wanted to give us, or the information that you wanted to give us before we move on. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I've probably given you more than I should have. Huh?
It's good stuff. Absolutely good stuff. I would say that maybe now the next thing that we need to think about is kind of what our next steps might be with all of this information now that we have it. We can maybe brainstorm some ideas. I think one of them has already kind of come up, that we could possibly do some surveying, perhaps. I don't know if that's desirable by this committee, but we could. Other ideas?
I would support a survey.
Mm-hmm. Again, I love the fact that it gives us that educational opportunity. So.
Sorry, I was typing, but yes, I would support a survey.
Okay. Yeah, that's been successful, and it really will help us to, because we think we might understand the climate and where people are at with things with regards to this, but I think that the point is well taken, that it's not really apples and oranges when you're comparing a public safety fee to a street thing. So I agree with that, and I bet you that we'll probably find that in the results, but we'll see. So maybe the next meeting we can brainstorm and talk about what that survey might look like.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Any other items that we want to add to the agenda for the next meeting? This was a really good meeting, by the way. I think we got quite a bit done. Okay, we will just make that the sole item unless anyone wants to add to it. But I think that'll be good.
Well, I think just going over everything again, going over our options again, just to make it really clear on what we're actually considering would be good. Like go over the same agenda, but just making it really clear on what we're considering, because we threw a lot of options out there tonight and we have a lot of information. So I think discussing that further, and then we can create a better survey and create a better way of understanding how to gather information that we need to make these decisions.
Mr. Spencer, I think I saw your hand waving.
You did. Michelle, do you know if the middle school bond has been paid off, or is it still on the tax rolls?
I would imagine it's still on the tax rolls. That wasn't that long ago, was it? And the
No,
school is actually going to have to look at doing something, because the elementary school, they're thinking, I don't really know. I'm kind of speaking out of school now, but I heard that they were going to split it into two separate schools. So, there might be a K through third grade and a fourth and fifth and sixth grade, and then I don't know. And they're remodeling the elementary school. At least they have plans for that. So I'm not quite sure where they are on that.
well, when you talked about whether or not taxes would go up, that is the biggie. If that was to roll off, then what Steve was talking about might be pertinent. Now, nobody's going to substitute roads for kids. I mean, we all know that it's all about the kids, but those bond issues are very tough votes for people that own real estate like I do. And I voted for those school bonds, especially the high school and grade school ones. But I know when they roll off, it makes thousands and thousands of dollars difference in the cost of my retail locations. And so if that middle school enrolled off, you would have a much better chance that year. I agree with Steve. That's when, if you were going to try for it, it might work. I personally don't think the public cares enough to put money to getting over the railroad tracks. And I also think the public would not be happy with the utility road fee. I think that'd be a tough sell. I think the LID is a slam dunk. It's been the way it's been done all my life where I've lived. And I've not seen people turn that down when it's the sidewalk and the curb and gutter. And so those are my reactions. If you're going to get that utility road fee in there, you're going to have a tough sale, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that we might want to do is do a survey of people who live along F Street and see, or 2nd Street, I'm sorry, and see if their willingness to opt into the LID, because we have to have 51% agree to do it before we can even go down that road. Is that right, Steve?
Are you muted, Steve?
It depends on your ordinance. And I haven't reviewed yours. Some cities have ordinance where you don't need any to implement you don't need any non-remonstrance. And so I just know politically, I've never seen a council be very supportive of an LID unless they have about 60% participants supporting it. So I just don't know what your ordinance says regarding LIDs.
So that might be some staff work we need to get done, Cliff.
Yeah, I think we just adopted that last year. That was a 51% because we looked at Cottage Groves and mirrored their verbiage in that. If you remember right. But I can look
I'm
that
remembering
up.
that. Yeah, maybe though we need to develop first, or at least put on our agenda for next time, to develop a information flyer that we would give to everyone on 2nd Street who would be impacted by this phase 1, with the amount that would be charged to them, and ask them if they would be willing to join into the LID in order to have this new improved frontage. I think we should talk about that as a committee.
Okay, so I have 3 items for the next agenda now, and the first one would be a pass through through the options again. Just maybe kind of a quick reiteration, because I think that is kind of handy when you start the meeting and just kind of freshen our minds about these things. And then secondly, to do a brainstorm around what kind of survey we might do, and then the third thing being the informational flyer. Do I have that right?
What was the second thing?
The second thing was brainstorming the survey. So that's after just reviewing options again real quick. And then
Okay.
the third thing was the flyer. Does that sound right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I think we have what we need for this meeting. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, I'm hearing nothing else, and so I will say that we will adjourn. Oh, we need to set a time. I'm sorry, for the next meeting. I almost jumped ahead. I was so a little hungry. Want to go eat dinner. So a month from now, would that be too soon, too late? About right? So if we do it the first Monday of the month, like we did this one, would that work for those involved?
That's the day before election.
No, let's not do that then. We can do 2 weeks after that, so that because we would have a council meeting that we would the following week. So that
Does
would
that
be.
Does that conflict with Veterans Day?
I am not sure.
Veterans Day is the 11th.
Yeah, so Veterans Day is the week before that, and then November 16th would be the Monday after the council meeting. And we don't have a work session.
Okay, that works for me. If that works for others.
November
That works for me.
16th at 6 p.m.
November 16th at 6 p.m. Okay, thank you. So now I think we will go ahead and call into the meeting. It is 7:19 p.m. And thank you, everybody.